Today, we are in the process, for those that can't see me saying who I sound like. We are doing our superintendent evaluation committee meeting, part 4 this afternoon. Our superintendent is running a little late. She had other obligations, but she is on her way. Well, she should be on her way in a few minutes. But we'll introduce our board and staff, and then we'll turn the rest of it over to the capable hands of Ms. Tamika Hardwick, Joyce Coleman, District 9.
Michelle McKissick, District 1.
Amber Hewitt Garcia, District 8.
Tamarcus Porter, District 4.
Sable Tech, District 5.
Tawana Murphy, District 7.
Natalie McKinney, District 2.
Stephanie Love, District 3.
Keith Williams, District 6.
That's everybody?
All right, hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. I appreciate when y'all speak back. All right. So we're gonna jump right into it. We've spent a lot of time together. I hate to block anybody's views. I'm going to sit right here, and so it's the same purpose, norms, agreement, same goals, because we're not there yet. Haven't reached agreement on everything beyond the weights, and so we're going to focus on that today. Next slide, please. I'm going to push us right on through. Just as the agenda, like before, we're going to recap the previous meetings, highlight agreed upon recommendations, address outstanding decisions, review and reconcile any current recommendations, and outline next steps. Next slide, please. So you've been busy. It's your 4th meeting. You've had 3 already. You met on the 26th, the 30th, the 15th. As you know, each meeting you progressed and had some deep discussion, some agreements that you've made. They're all there. You should have access to these. So in this whole thing now, there are like 69 slides. That's because I keep adding to the slides. So every meeting we add is in the same slide deck. I'm not going to read all the slides just so we can save time. Yep, next slide. So far, again, the board has recommended the use of the current evaluation instrument, and the superintendent agreed. We still have these outstanding decisions. So you still have to decide on the competency weights, how you're going to incorporate quantitative measures in your timeline and process for both informal and formal evaluation. All right, so if you recall, this is where we were. There's what the current evaluation is. There's the board's recommendation the board's current recommendation of student achievement at 25%, staff relations at 20%, and then the superintendent's recommendation is essentially, is keep the current evaluation the same. So we have to focus on here today. And I'm going to do something different. I'm going to call 2 people out, put them on the spot, and this is my observation of the conversation of who was where. So I'm going to ask Natalie to make the case for the superintendent's recommendation. And I'm going to ask Michelle to make the case for the board's recommendation. And the reason I'm doing that is because they both thought differently, right? And so Natalie, put yourself in the superintendent's shoes and make the case for what the superintendent has recommended for those weights.
Thank you. From the superintendent's perspective that I heard last, my perspective,
You're in her shoes, you are her. Yeah.
entered this with understanding that the instrument was going to remain the same. Given that the instrument was going to remain the same, I made the assumption that that would include the weights. So not just the competency areas, but also the weights. With an understanding that I will add quantitative measures under each of those weights in addition to the qualitative measures to ensure that we are focusing in on student achievement as the highest competency and the most important of the competencies, again, keeping the main thing the main thing. Business, finance, and governance, all of these are what the current, and community relations and staff relations are all the current measurements, and that is something that that I believe is fair, is equitable at this point in time, and that I think it is important that as we move forward, we work together to come up with a more comprehensive evaluation tool that I think both myself and the board understands we need to do.
All right, thank you. All right, and Michelle's gonna make the case for the board's recommendation of change, 25% student achievement, staff relations 20%.
Student achievement is the main thing. We're keeping the main thing at 25%. The reason why we are recommending changing staff relations to 20% is that we want to honor the fact that staff have a very important voice. We cannot achieve student achievement without staff. Staff also includes not just our amazing teaching staff, but also every component that makes up MSCS. We have roughly 6,000 teachers, but a total of 12,000 employees. And so we want to honor that voice of staff relations and how it relates to the superintendent. And that's the reasoning for increasing to 20%.
All right. Thank you both. What a way to argue the side that you don't really support. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's a good practice. You should start doing that. You should start doing that in your personal relationships. Put yourself in that person's shoes and argue their point and see it from their view. So now we were here, right? I want to continue to emphasize that you are talking about 5%. I think for both sides have legitimate arguments about why that 5% changed. So I do want to reject the notion that, because I'm hearing this some in the community around like, it's not fair, it's not fair. This is what it takes when people have differing opinions, right? And so not talking about a process conversation, right? From a quality perspective, what you want to do, we have to have a decision on this. And so you heard now both arguments. First, I would say we don't want to spend a whole lot of time discussing. I hope you've had time to reflect. Is there anybody that want to share, make a question, make a recommendation? How are you going to get out of this? Because it has to be one of these. And so if you want to, discuss it, let's open it up. But let's keep the main thing, and then let's figure out how we move forward. Is this the only mic? I'm gonna get my steps in today.
I think that at the end of the day, we have to vote on what we want. We do know that we have to have the superintendent make, have her recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's up to the board to decide which one we want to do. That's why it's called a vote. So we vote on whether we change it or whether we keep the superintendents. That's on all of us as a collective group to vote on what we want versus going back and forth. It's just now up to a vote. What do we want as a board?
I would say that's a way to look at it. I really want the board, okay, thank you. The board and the superintendent to move into a more collaborative where it's not always winners and losers vote, because she also gets a vote. If you look at that, she also gets a vote, right? So like moving from the harshness of a win, a loss, like what is in the best interest, right? What can give, and keeping in mind you're talking about 5% either way. So you're right, just that it's not just about, like there is a lot, like the work that we have to do, like over the last 3 years, this district has been so, this community is so divided over the most important thing in this community is education. We have been divided, everybody got a side. That is ridiculous because our kids are not benefiting from this, everybody has a side. So we gotta get into, we're really all in this together, right? And so you're right? And I'm not saying you're wrong, you're right. We have to get to a decision. It's just that how do you wanna get to that decision? She said vote. Did you have some recommendations beyond that?
Oh, because you just said something just minutes ago. At the end of the day, it's about the kids. And the staff relations is as important in order to get to the children, we have to start at the staff. The staff is the main people, the people that gets everything moving. It's like a train reaction. They have to start there to get there. So the relations with the staff is important. So taking it from 15% to 20% is reasonable. I don't think it's just a 5-point difference. It's not a big change. It's just a 5-point difference. So I'm thinking that we should just stick with it and we just vote on it, okay, and not make it so difficult.
Okay, and so I'll just say, because I'm gonna be the advocate on both sides. you didn't say community relations, you also gotta do community relations. Community relations could have been 5 point.
It could have.
Right.
But the key point is the staff. That's the key point.
To who?
To the children, to us,
But also to you
to
right
me,
now.
and
That's
to
what I'm
me,
saying.
and to me. But it's about the kids at the end of the day.
That's fair. I'm not saying it's not fair, but I also want to make sure, because the tension that I heard in the last meeting is if people are feeling like my way is the way, and like if we don't do this, we're not thinking about that. And it's just multiple ways to come at this. I saw Michelle, and I saw Sable, then I saw Karen.
Yeah, I really have given this a lot of thought over the last week and really wrestled with it. And it actually came to this point, that's why I smiled when we said argue for the point, but I was like, all right, 5 points. It's not so much the percentage point, it's just the spirit behind it to make sure that we're really focused on the voice of staff and not that this is trying to be punitive toward, as a result of, there's been a lot of change. Let's just kind of call it out for what it is. There's been a lot of change the last several months. And so, I absolutely believe, without question, we've been arguing for this for quite some time to adjust this model that we have for evaluating superintendents. And I just want to see a big overhaul change, and so 5% wasn't significant for me, but I want to move forward. And so, I'd be willing to say, okay, if it's just 5%, if the superintendent is okay with this, because the spirit of it, as long as we make sure that this is something truly about staff voice and their perspective and not being punitive with that 5%.
I think that's great, Michelle. Actually, I actually think that's great. Because I did have feedback from community, even parents reached out to me, former teachers, current teachers, principals, and they just want to feel like they have a voice. And as a former educator, being in a position where I once didn't feel like I had a voice, I think that's important. So we do sit in this space to be a voice for the voiceless. And I don't think I think it's fair, because when we evaluate principals, when we evaluate teachers, they have those inputs. So I think it's only fair. And my kids go to school in the district as well. So, you kind of take it like, I do want to hear honest feedback from them, because on the board side, I want to see what is it that we can do to actually help. I was like, I'll come and volunteer if I can do something within guidelines of being a board member. I don't mind helping when I can, because I do know that we do need that additional support. So I just want to make sure they feel like their voices are being heard, because a lot of them expressed that they didn't feel like they were. So.
I think unless, I heard at the last meeting, Dr. Figgins express that she was not okay with the 5%. And when I think about the 3 quantitative measures against our priorities, or the 3 priorities with the quantitative measures, which will be supplemented or put under these categories where appropriate, the 5% to me does not make it is not worth the, I think, distrust that could come from that. I want our superintendent now to know that we're not changing, not to feel like we're changing the rules in the middle of the game. And while at the same time acknowledging this does need an overhaul. So I really appreciate, I think Board McKissick and I maybe convinced each other of positions. I think if the board, I could go either way, but I am inclined to make sure that our leader in this moment feels supported through an evaluation that is really meant to be a flashlight, not a hammer, right? We want to improve and be able to gather evidence about how we can support and gather resources. So I see the 3 priorities going under 2 under student achievement and 1 under staff relations. So that contributes to the amount of evidence that we're collecting. So keeping the weights the same, but then agreeing on what those quantitative measures are and taking the superintendent's recommendation.
I know you didn't want to dwell on this, but just hearing about it, I think a win, not to look at it in terms of win or lose, but the qualitative measures that were put forward, that's significant. That is probably the biggest significant change that we can have here, because it was a very thin evaluation tool. And that right there is something that I was very happy to see. And I applaud, my colleagues for that, but just for 5%, now you got me going back the other way. But
I would rather spend the time on that.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is like, I don't wanna get bogged down on the percentages, when I really wanna focus on the qualitative, so we can really get into the nooks and crannies, and that's a sticking point, where we're just like, okay.
So let me check the temperature. Who now wants to agree with the superintendent's recommendation and stay with the current evaluation as is? Okay, so that's 5. So I'll say this. So narrative is important. And I have to tell you, when I hear, even because you just said, it's not fair and it's rushed. So you have a contract that says you have to do it in October. Y'all didn't make this up. This board couldn't have done it before September. So you first start meeting in September. So I just want to make sure the narrative, because some of that is out and it's feeding this kind of desire for this divisiveness that keeps showing up amongst you. So that's just not true. Also, that contract has been in place since April. Y'all hired the superintendent, started in April. That's 6 months. So anybody who didn't know that you had to do this, not paying attention to your contracts and your policies. So I'm saying, please don't buy into the narrative around somehow this flipped up and y'all made this up. That's not true. You are following your policy and your superintendent's contract, and you have to do it now, by Friday, because you're going to understand there's some travel. So I'm just saying, in the spirit of keeping this together, it's one of the principles of communications that we talked about is assume good intentions. And one of the things that we have to take out of the energy that we bring a lot is we're assuming bad intentions. So what I heard is that some people are assuming the change is because somebody's trying to do something else, and assuming not the change because somebody's trying to do something else. And you have to get into, when you are talking about this school year, these students, you have a brand new superintendent, what is best? What's going to give you your best data? What are the data that you need? It's not like you're going to change the data, right? And a 5%, the reason why I say you're not far off is not like any of you came back and said, I don't even like this evaluation, I want some brand new. Because I also want to say that you could have, right? You could have said, let's do a brand new. So you could have. So that's a reason why you didn't. But that still does not change the fact that you could have came September 1 and said, here's the new evaluation that we want to do, and you had 2 months, September and October. I'm saying, I don't suggest that you do, I agree with you on the use of the current instrument for this year, but I'm saying you could have. The superintendent could have come back and said, I don't like this evaluation at all, I want something new, right? So in that, y'all didn't even take the time to celebrate that was a major agreement that you all had. Y'all still showed up like y'all fighting. Like that was a major agreement that you both agreed to say, let's keep the evaluation. But you also signaled that you all agreed that for beyond this year, you want a different evaluation. That's major, right? That is major. Then you got stuck up on 5%. That is not a big hill. Like, is that the hill that you all really want to, die on? So, I'm going to manage. I don't know how to get, I just saw 5 people, right? Like, I assume that to make this official, Mr. General Counsel, I guess at some point you have to be in a business meeting. So maybe you have another meeting where you go and make all of this official. But I just saw 5 people. So what's going to be your process? Because I don't know what your decision is. Do you have a decision on this? Are you still staying with the current evaluation, no changes? Or are you still in undecided lane? It's not, it's not a voting meeting, so you can just still take. So I'll ask again. Is it the superintendent's recommendation? So this is not an official vote. You'll have to take, but for now, you're still in an open meeting, so you can still make you can indicate your preference. But just from your preference, are we?
It appears the preference is the superintendent's recommendation. So basically
staying with the current, right? Because keep in mind, it's not like the superintendent is recommending something that hadn't been in place since 2013, right? Where she's recommending It's been in place since 2013. So, you know, I can't tell you what to do, and I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'm trying to say, do we have a decision, or do you all need to keep working? Are you hearing anything?
I just,
I think I would rather spend our time asking questions about the quantitative, measurable outcomes that were presented to us, because I think that would take a lot of time. And so it seems like we have a majority that are happy with the superintendent's recommendations or keeping the original weights. And so I would like to pivot to discuss what then are those things we're measuring under each of those categories, because I think that will take more time than this.
But you need a decision on this. I don't know where you are. I don't know where the board is.
I think Natalie.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, what you just said.
Last week, I was doing the board recommendation, but I went back and watched the meeting this past weekend, and you said something so profound.
Ooh.
This is not the hill that we want to die on.
Okay.
Every one of us is going to grade the superintendent individually. She is going to come back collectively and say the things she needs to work on and the things she is doing exceptionally well. That is the meat of the superintendent's evaluation.
All right, so I'm gonna ask one more time. The current evaluation, it really is where the superintendent is. Raise your hand if you are now saying we should stick with the current I'm sorry, you already said the current evaluation instrument, but the weights as presented in the current document. Raise your hand. And if the superintendent were in here, I would say that's a clear indication if that's where you want to go. So can we close the window on this and say you're agreeing with the superintendent and staying with the evaluation as is? Can we move on that?
Yes.
All right, give yourself a hand.
I would say to my colleagues though, I get what you were saying, and I think that is just something, just to acknowledge that. My purpose was just like, to move forward to the next part, because I do believe it has to be also overhauled.
Yeah.
But I really did listen and internalize all of that over the weekend to get ready for today. So.
I agree. I mean, the majority voted. I'd rather stick with what we have, what we came up with, but if the majority voted, I have to go with the majority. But my focus is still
Well, I
there.
think we know what.
That's fair.
And that's fair, but the majority voted, but I didn't vote that way, just for the record, I didn't vote that way.
We did vote. We did not vote. We did not vote.
Y'all have to vote.
Oh, we ain't vote, I'm just saying, you know, and I pretend.
Y'all have indicated.
And I pretend.
So basically what you just did is now the board's recommendation is aligned with the superintendent, and at some meeting, Mr. General Counsel, y'all have officially voted.
Right.
So what I'm gonna do now is bring back to the attention the quantitative measures that the superintendent has suggested. I would say we need to move from this until she gets here, because I don't think we can discuss this really in her absence, because I'm assuming questions are to her. But just so we're grounded, is that okay? But you know, when she gets here, we'll come back to it, but just so we're grounded there. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So, anyway, so the first priority, and these were priorities, there were 3 priorities that were established for this school year at the time that the board and superintendent approved the budget in June. Keep in mind, we're talking about this school year, right? Once you all get through this, I'm gonna already tell you, come January, you need to start meeting again about your future evaluation process, your values, what your strategic planning, like that's what we have to do, right? Okay, so the first priority was improve academic growth, achievement, and literacy levels for all students. As a board, you asked the superintendent to come back with 2 to 3 quantitative measures, or 1 to 2, I can't remember, but for each. So for this improved academic growth, the superintendent has recommended a 2% growth in proficiency or above as follows. So the students in grades 3 through 5th, they are currently at 25.4%. She is recommending 27.4%. Grades 6 through 8 from 17% to 19%. grades 9 through 12 from 24.6% to 26.6%. So this is, the superintendent is saying, well, I don't want to put words in the mouth, but generally it's based on what we're going to do, this is where her prediction of what growth for this year would look like. Now, I see the hands and we can have general, but she really, I mean, some of the questions are, I'm sure, to her, but I'm gonna, you know, but we'll spend a little,
I just wanted to ask, when were these recommendations made? Like,
so they were asked, so at the meeting on the 15th. She
so
read
these
them
were
out.
just, so she just made these recommendations, they weren't previously made? Well,
She gave it to
how
us
she
on-
By process, no, so she did it by the time that the board asked her, so remember when you met, there was two things, the instrument and the quantitative measure. She had them to the 14th, so she presented this formally on the 15th. She read them out in the record,
Okay.
at that meeting on the 15th.
And then we got a paper.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think she submitted it too. But yeah, so this was, so to be clear, the priority was established in June. This board asked her to come with measures for those, because if you recall in the superintendent's contract, it's required to have quantitative measures for the evaluation. So the superintendent is suggesting these are the measures. This is what she's going to report to you as evidence of improving academic growth.
I think a challenge that we have, I think if I recall, that these were based on that these numbers were based on annual measurable objectives. The challenge that we have is twofold. One, well, really onefold. The policy, not the policy, the contract requires us to evaluate her by May 1st. We would not have any state data.
So can I stop you? You get, don't get too far ahead right
Okay.
now, because you're right where you're going. But that will, don't go there yet.
Okay.
Right now, let's say the conditions were perfect and this was, you could have this data. So don't deal with that, because you're right where you're going. Right now, the issue is, would the board agree with that being the measure of growth?
Personally, no.
Well, that's why I said you don't want to really discuss it yet because she's not here. But so there's an issue that's going to come up that we'll discuss later. It's about timing. But the question would become, this is what the superintendent is proposing. So the board would have to then, ask questions and all that. But is this the right level for this year that would measure growth?
Well, when you talk about level, we're also talking about what the data says, what it's telling us, right? So those are AMOs, so we can talk about what AMOs actually tell.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So AMOs, my understanding, AMOs simply tell us about the students, I think it's math and reading, or math and reading, and it tells us not about students, but about the scores on the test. So because we have this all in literacy levels for all students, so one thing that AMOs are missing are the literacy levels. So am I able to talk about the measure?
Not in her because
Okay.
I don't know what she may say, no, that's not what I mean. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's a great question, but she does need to be in the room so that she can, because she may say, no, I'm saying I'm measuring this based on something else. I don't know, but yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that, again, based on what I heard in the meeting, when she read it off, these are AMOs, and I think AMOs are not going to necessarily give us what we're looking for there.
No, that's fair. All right. Any other on this? And we'll come back to it, because I bet you have questions, okay? So the next priority was recruit and increase the retention of the most effective district leaders and teachers in the nation for our students. The superintendent is proposing a measure of a 1% decrease of teacher vacancies in instructional positions and a 2% decrease of unlicensed teachers. So basically, if at the end of the year, you all realize a 1% decrease of teacher vacancies, she is saying that is evidence that you all have recruited and increased the retention of most effective teachers. So we align on that, right? That this is saying, this is proof of that. This is proof that we met that goal. Again, she's not here in a general conversation, but she has to be here to defend this. And there's
So if there's I'll bring this one, but if there's between those two tables, sure, that might fit, as Natalie said.
I would agree that those two bullet points talk about recruitment and retention. I think the piece that's missing is effective, of how will we measure effectiveness of district leaders.
Okay. All right. We'll go forward. And then the third one was prepare students for the global workforce through rigorous coursework and certifications in supportive, high-quality facilities and learning environments. So she has 3 here. Increase of CCTE offerings by 2 programs, from 47 to 49. A 0.8% increase of on-track students, from 88.2% to 89%. And then a 2% increase of students in dual enrollment classes. So again, those 3 measures would be proof that if we meet or exceed these measures, would be proof that the district is preparing students for the global workforce and the rest of that.
Again, I think we don't have anything for rigorous. I think we can have more for rigorous coursework. For instance, AP courses, because I'm thinking about graduate, I'm thinking about ready graduate. We're graduating a lot of kids, but are we graduating ready graduates? So I think that we're missing a piece there. I think we're also missing a piece around high quality facilities and learning environments. We're going through we're getting ready to get the real estate and facilities report. So how do we use that as an evaluation piece? And also with the many different deferred maintenance programs that we're engaging in, I just want us to be able to think about how we can possibly incorporate that.
And that was my,
The 2% increase in students in dual enrollment courses, what's the measure? Because you have a warm body in the class. Does that mean that you're advancing them for the dual enrollment?
I think I just want to echo my colleagues in the respect of focusing on dual enrollment courses and what does that mean in terms of AP classes or international baccalaureate programs, just to be a little bit more specific with that, because dual enrollment, I mean, typically that I associate that with, say, if you're taking a class also at Southwest or something like that, but there are many ways that we can increase perhaps even more than 2% in that area of growth.
I was just gonna echo what Michelle said, actually, and a little bit of what Natalie said as far as with the CCTE offerings, do they have the actual resources that need to be successful?
I like a measure around CCTE, but that is focused on quantity instead of quality. And I think the overall test passage rates or evidence of high demand certifications, which is also part of our TISA calculation of high demand occupations, even if that number is small, what are the discrete number of students who will be leaving with certifications that are sought after that lead to high paying jobs?
And maybe we can have some sort of measurement as to if those students actually obtain employment. We want to look at that. I think that would be important to see how effective our programs have been with those certifications.
I think when we start thinking about the CCT offerings and how we align whether we're doing what we need to do, there is a TISA outcome that we can get outcome funding for based on how we perform and that our district performs in certain areas. So I think we have an opportunity to really dig deeply and figure out what that measure needs to look like. And make some money.
What do you all think in terms of how is our standing in comparable, just Chattanooga, other larger urban areas? How how are we holding our weight? Is that something that we should think and consider? Like, does that factor into, I mean, not just rural areas, but school districts that are very similar in size and in terms of the type of students? So just something to think about, maybe just of how we are just operating in a silo, just MSCS. What do we look like in comparison to other comparable size districts, or even, I know we're the largest district in the state, but in terms of the type of population that we have.
I think from what, I'm gonna copy off what you just said, because from what I heard, we low man on the totem pole when it comes to that, because I think some of our issue is with the increasing of the CCTE. It's okay if they can do hands-on, but the main focus is they cannot pass the test. That has been the issue right there.
And there's some evidence-based reasons for that too, right? That are beyond students' actual ability and what they know and what teachers have taught, right? So some of that is just the difficulty of using the that kind of objectional, high stakes testing to measure students. But I would say long term, that's something that you should be thinking about, right? That's not something that can be developed right now. Right? But what are the other beyond the tests that you are saying is fair to measure what our students know? And asking the superintendent what kinds of instruments are reliable enough that could give you that data. And as a district, you start looking at that as well as the state tests. That's something that you can think about.
I agree with all the board members. Years ago, we had a system to monitor graduates. Is that still in operation?
What they're doing next.
Yeah.
There's a state employment database, but it's not tied to school. I think it's just county.
We could, hypothetically, get the seniors who graduate from high school and enroll in a college, monitor them for a year or two.
I think it's great. I think it's just what we're working with right now for what she has done. That might be for our next evaluation tool.
Yeah.
Also, what? Oh, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
Monitor them for schooling and working. Yeah, years from now.
So years ago, I'm talking 1989, when I graduated from Tresvant High School, then Mayor Harrington had a graduate tracking program. And it was active for a couple, I don't know how much longer, so they would send something to my permanent home address, so my mom would get something. Am I still at the University of Tennessee? Am I, still doing this? And they tracked it, but I don't know what ever happened to it. But his point was, as a former superintendent, was where you are trying to go. What are our graduates doing really when they leave the system, and also trying to understand that 4-year, 6-year college graduation rate. So I do. So we're a board member, where Commissioner McKissick was going. So even as you think about these, we're going to move on from that and come back. Keep in mind, you're talking about the evaluation for this year, not in the out years. And what could you actually measure as an accurate measure of if you're moving this way or if you're moving that way, right? Under the leadership of Dr. Fagans, right? So that's what you really want to be. So you have to really couch it in, and the reason I say that, so while the policy, we're gonna go to where now it was ready to go, while the superintendent's contract said this must be done by October is actually pretty late, right? So if you said we want to see growth in AP, well, if those AP classes not already in place, it's kind of hard to grow because the school year has started, right? So there is some thinking about the actual timing. I'm gonna go, can I move from this and then we come back? Okay. So go ahead, go up one. Okay. Yeah, so to talk about, so you still had 2 pieces for your evaluation. Those were informal and the formal, right? And so we didn't talk much about process for both. Again, I just want to remind you, your policy just says, your policy is permissive.
It says nothing stops you from doing an informal evaluation of the superintendent's performance. But the superintendent's contract is not permissive. It says will. So the fact that even you're talking about informal evaluation, it's not because your policy says so, it's because the superintendent's contract says so. Do we all understand this? Like, this is not something that the board is saying we must do. The superintendent's contract requires it. The board and superintendent will conduct an informal mid-year evaluation. The evaluation will be by individual board members. Now, the reason I want to raise this is because informal evaluation is just that. An informal evaluation could just be a 30-minute meeting with a board member to say, this is what I think, this is what I think, right? It's only a feedback loop. How many of you ever managed a team? If you've ever managed a team, you get feedback all the time, right? So this should not feel like a burden, a headache. This should be welcome feedback. I mean, if I'm a new leader, you're board members, you want this. So this is not, well, I would say, this should not be some gotcha moment, right? This is superintendent to individual board members, right? As required by the contract. So, anybody have thoughts on what this could look like? I mean, I do, because I don't want y'all to spend, too much time, because I don't want y'all to overcomplicate this.
I think the superintendent already has a dashboard where she's established baselines for next level readiness data. So continuing to have a formal update of where we're at on the things that she's already instituted measurement based on her 100-day plan. But I know she's also soon going to unveil to us the first of 4 quarterly reports where she is evaluating every contract and program within the district, which I think goes above and beyond what we would need. So her presenting an updated next level readiness data dashboard and a report that she has planned to give to us with a request for either a individual meeting or written feedback about that, aligned to our priorities. I think that feels like we're not recreating it, and we give feedback on systems that are already in place while getting really important baseline data.
So I'll say one of the most important things you said, aligned to. So the conversation that you informally have should be leading to the conversation you're going to formally have. So you don't want to talk about flowers in the informal, and then the evaluation is going to be about, trees.
Yeah.
So
the total sort of scorecard,
and it's not even
aligned to.
Yeah, it does. Well, it's now the student achievement is the things that's in the formal evaluation, but it's not. It can be as informal as if Michelle is the superintendent and I am saying, Dr. McKissick, I think student achievement. Here are these 5 measures. From what I can tell, this is going really well, right? But on this, I think business and finance, I'm not seeing where there's strength here. When individual members do that with her, that gives her data on at least the board's perception and on what she needs to make sure she's doing between that informal and the formal. So you don't want those conversations to be disconnected from eventually how she's going to be evaluated. But it really can be as simple as a one-on-one meeting. Like you can say, between November and December 15th, the superintendent will meet one-on-one with each board meeting member for the informal evaluation. Informal evaluations don't have to be written. If you've ever, again, if you managed a team and I informally correct Michelle, I'm just saying Michelle looks like I'm picking on her, but she's right here. It doesn't go in the file, right? That's just an informal. If I say, hey, I need you to show up more, that's informal. It doesn't go in her file. Now, there could be a next level, like, okay, we're gonna have this conversation, but it's going in your file, right? But that one's just data for the superintendent, between the board and the superintendent. Y'all don't have to share it with each other. This is just informal. This is what it could be, because it's not really clear. So my suggestion would be, don't overthink this and don't overcomplicate this piece of it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but this was something that was implemented for the new current superintendent, right?
It's in her contract.
By the past board.
No, it's in her contract.
It's in her contract.
Yeah, she initiated.
She initiated this. This is in her contract.
I got you.
So your policy only says Nothing stops you from doing it. So without this, we wouldn't even have to be talking about it. Y'all can decide if you're gonna do it or not. But her contract is clear, will conduct. Now, I'm not here to legally advise the board, but I will say, as a lawyer, if it's in a contract, you do not violate contracts. Because if you violate this contract, then you're saying what other pieces of the contract are unimportant. So that's what I'm saying.
For me, I should maybe just applaud that just a little bit because it holds us accountable.
Yes,
It should be done in the
yes.
first place, so
Yes. Wait a minute, I'm gonna go to Natalie and then back to Michelle. Oh,
Oh, I just want to say that, it was initiated in good faith, saying like, I want to work with the board. That was what, she went beyond what the policy called for. But I was just thinking in terms of this informal evaluation, just so that she has an idea of kind of a feeling of where we stand. Those 5 areas, is that when we informally speak with her, that everyone addresses something in those 5 areas, so she kind of has a pulse of, instead of we're all talking about flowers and ladybugs, or whatever, we all, have the 5 different areas where something is that she has a feel of what we're all thinking in the 5 different areas en route to the formal evaluation.
well, I mean, if she's smart, I mean, she'll ask questions, right? So she's in with you, what are you thinking? And she's probably gonna drive a lot of that conversation. But I just wanted to caution, it's not about some other dashboard, it's still back to what you just agreed upon, so that she has an idea. And I'm thank you for saying, this is not punitive. And it just keeps, for some reason, the energy outside of here is as if these are all gotcha moments. No, I'm thinking like, I don't know a person who works at a high-performing organization who don't have formal and informal evaluations. So I don't know how this got to be some boogeyman type tactic. I'm saying, resist the urge to overthink it. It's just, you get time with it between now. And the only reason why I'm even saying those is because it still says no later than 6 months. So if you were on the timeline of formal, May 1st, 6 months after May 1st is November. And the other caution I'd say is, the board made the decision that Dr. Fagan starts April 1 as superintendent. That's 6 months now. Most employees get a 90-day, are you doing well? Can you still stay here, right? So by November, that's gonna be 8 months. It is completely fair for y'all to have an informal, it's just a feedback loop. There's no gotcha, there's no, we're trying to, trap somebody into something it shouldn't be. And if that's what's in your heart, I ask you as a board member to take it out your heart. That's not the point of this work at all, not on any level. Natalie and then Amber.
No, I just think, Michelle, and you have said it quite accurately and eloquently, that the contract says we have to do this, 1, and 2 is that we have to do it on each of the performance objectives.
Yeah.
So that keeps us confined to those 5 areas.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear that we already have a outlined process of the way we do it.
The only recommendation I was going to make is that when we get to a vote, we all agree that we will schedule a 30-minute phone or in-person meeting with the superintendent by the end of November.
So like that kind of, I'm gonna cut you off,
Like
Next slide, I'm gonna cut you off.
But, I mean, if we,
That's what you get ahead.
timeline.
Because you're getting ahead, because you're getting ahead. Calm down.
Yeah.
What's your process gonna be? Thank you. Thank you. So now, we got an informal evaluation process decisions. How are you gonna do it and when and date? My suggestion, so that you don't get, is that you just say, only because it says within 6 months, which is November, right? Maybe you give yourself grace because it's gonna be hard. Maybe you say by now and December 15th. I'm just making up something, but I'm saying to give yourself, you should try to get it done in November. I don't think you all are gonna be like, oh, it didn't happen in November, so now we gotta call the lawyer because of the contract, but the contract does say within 6 months, which is November. So I would say you decide how, and then, the how. And so it sounds like one-on-one time with each board member is the how, right? 30 minutes to an hour. So she might want to talk to somebody for 2 hours. So as long as you do it, right? And that the informal conversation is about the performance objectives. It's no grade, right? It's just, this is how, and it's an honest, authentic, true conversation, but it's board member to the superintendent.
Yeah, I would like to see that, where it's an hour set aside. Because right now, we're all having, at least, weekly 15, 20-minute chit chats, maybe your check-ins. And I do mine over the phone, but I'm gonna make a point to be in person, face to face, and I want an hour. If I'm gonna make, myself available, then I want an hour of her time. And so, would be my thing. And I personally would love to have it done before Thanksgiving, because I don't think anybody wants to deal with this.
But you say you have an hour. I want 15 minutes.
And so, but just, so that we can really be free of this before the holiday season and.
So the recommendation is set up the meeting for an hour. If somebody take 20 minutes, that is their prerogative. But again, this is back to don't overthink. Don't overthink. Set an hour meeting, right? So does people agree with that? Between now and Thanksgiving?
I agree by November 30th, just to be in compliance with, stay consistent in compliance with the contract.
Okay, is somebody writing this? Because I'm not writing this. So, board members are gonna have 1 hour, one-on-one meeting, up to 1 hour, one-on-one meeting.
Thanksgiving's November 28th, so that's perfect.
With the superintendent by November 30th, right, which is the fact that going to be, like you said, right? To discuss informally the thoughts, feelings on the performance objectives as in the evaluation. You good on that? Can I get thumbs up? I don't see thumbs up. Everybody, Tawana, what thumbs up?
They to the side.
Why they to the side? They
That's 30 minutes tops.
Well, but you can do 30 minutes. So here's the thing. This is why I'm saying y'all overthinking. I said up to an hour. If you take 5 minutes, that's on you. Up to an hour. That's what I'm saying. So like what we're doing is making everybody win here, right? Like there's no winners and losers here. Up to an hour. Shouldn't take more than an hour. And if somebody just wants 10 minutes, then you do 10 minutes. And that's what I'm saying. So can I get a thumbs up? Is that a go?
Is this, so I'm confused, this is the evaluation?
It's the informal evaluation. This is just one-on-one time between now and November 30, where board members are gonna just share in conversation with the superintendent, one-on-one. It's not written, it is just an informal conversation about where you all see the district at this point. Yes.
I don't mean to be a mic hog here, but just like the reason why it is important to me for face-to-face time is, I'll be honest, I think these sessions have been very beneficial for us as a board, as a new board that's come together. And as when you are looking at someone face-to-face, it's like you work a little bit hard to try to understand and see the person and truly hear them. And as opposed to when you put a barrier up like a phone call or a virtual meeting, that level of even maybe discomfort. Discomfort isn't always bad. And so just understand like maybe where, you're coming from and connecting with the superintendent and vice versa. And I think it just kind of helps to promote understanding of really sharing what I'm thinking and feeling and vice versa.
Why, was there some disagreement about the one-on-one?
No, I'm just, I'm like, when I heard like 5-10 minutes, it just like.
Oh, but that's okay. So that's why it's up to an hour, right? And everybody gets to manage their time on their own. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, and we don't even know. You don't even know. Somebody could think it's gonna be 5 minutes and it could end up being a whole hour, right? And so that's an example of, like, we don't need to overthink that one, right?
Okay.
So
Got it.
is it
That's my point.
thumbs up? I just want to make sure we agree on this. Keith, is your thumbs up? Say more. What would you like? Yeah. Your thumbs up. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, now, you won't show me, but you'll show somebody. You won't show me. All right. Amber, y'all with us? Y'all with us?
Yeah, I was just explaining the evaluation.
So we should share that out loud.
Okay.
Everybody, and one mic, one conversation, so share it out loud.
I was just reinforcing what we were deciding here, is an informal evaluation, it's just a conversation, it doesn't have to be written. We said now up to 1 hour, required by the contract to stay in compliance. We'll do it by November 30th. What we are working on is going to be written, rated, and it is for our spring formal evaluation.
Well, it's the entire, you're working on all of that. There's an entire system. It requires an informal and the informal, so you have to.
No, I mean, the formal side, it will actually have a written component. There will be a rating with weights where you get a 1 to a 5 in each.
So just to be clear, all of the meetings that we've been having previously with the tool, the weight of the tool, we're no longer using that.
Yes.
Or we're doing this in addition to.
The whole process requires you to have a formal
Sit
and an
down.
informal.
Okay, gotcha.
This is
So-
just the informal part of that. We get ready to move to the formal part, which would then be the form, your rating, and all of that.
Okay.
But there was a piece in her contract that said you do an informal evaluation.
Gotcha.
So it's both.
Okay, so we'll still sit down in November to do,
That's informal.
okay.
So keep in mind, your evaluation process, so there's the first thing you cleared already is the instrument, right? You're gonna use the instrument as is, in those ways. That instrument is used for both informal and formal. In the informal, though, it is just a conversation between individual board members and the superintendent, right? About how you are thinking about those things right now. State of the district right now, but it's just a conversation. That's gonna happen between now and November 30 as required by her contract. So that, you clear on that. Now, so thumbs up on that. That's just the informal. We still gotta get to the formal process. All right. Stephanie, is your thumb up? That's okay. I'm like, he's already told me don't worry about his thoughts. I'm not gonna worry about his thoughts.
She tried to check.
All right. So we move. So, Madam Chair, I'm assuming the board office. I'm looking at you. You're like, gonna coordinate this. Get those meetings set. All right. When are you gonna have those meetings set by?
Oh, we're gonna do it within the next week.
All right. Within the next week,
So they'll
you
know
are going to get polling to set up your time that's between now and November 30, so it can get set. So it'll take time with the gotta get the superintendent's availability too. All right, moving forward.
Danisha will coordinate with Julie.
Okay, Danisha will coordinate with Julian, what I'm told. So now we're moving to the formal, right, which is the formal evaluation. I just wanted to first ground you back into what's in both your policy and the contract. The contract says the board shall evaluate the superintendent no later than May 1st of every year. That's in the contract. The superintendent will conduct and submit a self-evaluation with any supporting documentation at least 14 days prior to the formal evaluation. That's also in the contract. I will say your policy does not have bullet 1 or bullet 2. So the policy is the policy unless it's changed by what? The contract. The contract is, or some regulation or whatever, right? The contract provides more detail on what you must do. So it says May 1st, and it says superintendent will submit documentation at least 14 days before. The policy does say the superintendent will submit documentation. It does not say at least 14 days before. Okay. And then your policy does say the evaluation will be a composite of the evaluation by individual board members, but the board as a whole will meet as provided by law with the superintendent to discuss the composite evaluation. So what this means, so the form that you now have, you will get at least 14 days before the date that you're doing the evaluation. Oh, so many of y'all on your phone, I'm gonna stop till y'all looking at me because I'm a former teacher and I am not sitting here talking to myself. Go ahead, finish your email, but come back, be present. Because I'm gonna go through this and then you're gonna say, what we just say? So we ready? Can we move? This is important because all of this feeds your timeline. So 14 days prior to, or at least 14 days prior to the evaluation date. So let's say you say the date is May 1st. That means just roughly April 15th, roughly, the superintendent will submit to you her self-evaluation. That means she would have gone through, scored her leadership against the evaluation instrument that you approved. And so for the first one, she'll say, I think I deserve a 5, and here's everything to prove that I have a 5 on this. And then the next one, I think I deserve whatever score, and here's all the documentation to approve that. So it's gonna be a thick book. It's gonna be a lot of stuff. When you are diligently doing the job that you were elected to do, guess what that means? You gotta look at all of it. Because how else are you gonna know? So you can't skimp on this. Because in fairness to, not just the superintendent, but it's also in fairness to her, it's in fairness to these children, that you look at what she submits and determine now you may look at what she submits and disagree that it goes toward whatever the score, but you still have to look at what she submits. So you'll get that, and then you'll do your own scoring. And then in the past, you've used a third party. That's not me, that's a company. Submit gets all of your individual scores, and then comes with the board has said. So the reason I brought all of this is because even one of these decisions determines your timeline. So and I'll turn it over to where Commissioner McKinney was trying to go, is that this is tough. Why is this tough? I mean, May 1st, you're not gonna have any data, right? Like, you're not gonna have data from the state. I won't say you won't have data. You have data every day. Districts are raw for data. You won't have data from the state. But the state is not the only data that the superintendent can say she is using to submit that academic achievement is happening. So that's why I said, we're not necessarily in the box. She could say for this year, it won't be the state data. Here's something, like for instance, I remember we used to do Re 180. So she may say, we're gonna look at the data from pre and post Re 180 as indicator, right? That is not unfair, is what I'm saying. So I know we're relying on the state, but this year you're not gonna be able to. Because number one, you're on this May 1st date, which means you gotta start this process pretty early, even before April. Because she gets 2 weeks to do it, that means you should have 2 weeks to do it. You don't get it and then have to do it in 2 days, right? It's gonna be a thick notebook. You gotta have the time to do it. You all have lives outside of this. Then the third party gotta have time to process it. I mean, this whole process could take 2 months. So that's why moving forward, you gotta do something about this May 1st date. Now that would mean working with the superintendent on contract, because it's in her contract. And so you're not in a position to move this right now. But you also have to keep in mind, this evaluation is 1 year, it's the first year, it's baseline, right? It is not going to be, I mean, it's gonna give you some information. You know how long it takes to move districts. Like, the stuff that's happening in the district now is really not because of what was done last year. It is accumulation of things that have happened over a decade, right? Including poor housing policies in the community, right? Including low wages in the community, right? Like, all of that stuff is impacting what's happening. So it's not some magic bullet like, oh, the superintendent came in and the superintendent did these 3 things, and those 3 things are going to result in these 6 things. Like, it's not, we wish it was that cut and dry. It's not that cut and dry. The reason I say this, you don't have to be so concerned about the May 1st date. It's still pretty early, even without relying on the state data. There's a lot of school left. Like, graduations haven't even happened yet, so you're not going to be measuring graduations, right? So part of this would be, you're still getting your process down. You're gonna still have some time between now and the end of the year, of this year, to really hone in on, okay, what are those data sets gonna be, right? So if when you were looking at that quantitative data, if your hesitation was because of what the state might not have, you don't have to be stuck with that. You can say, superintendent, what are, chief academic officer, superintendent, what are the other things we can rely on to tell us if we're moving? Now, it's still another data set. So let's say I'm the superintendent and I push you and I say Re 180. Is Re 180 still a thing? It's not? Okay. So it used to be. Well, I'm just keep saying it, because that way then I don't have to implicate any contractor or vendor that you're currently working with. So let's say it's Re 180 and I'm the superintendent and I say, you gotta let me use Re 180 and I'm gonna give you Re 180 from November and we're gonna do it again in April, and that's gonna be the measure. You may say yes, and you pop that up May 1st. Well, when that state data comes in the fall, you're gonna be like, you were way off. That's still another data point for you, right? Because it done told you a lot, right? About, is Re 180 actually an accurate measure? And if not, why are we using it? Like, it's so much that you get, right? It is so many domino effects. So I'm saying, again, don't overthink it. It's okay, it's May 1st, you can stick with this, and you can ask, what are the actual measures? I think the other thing, for the questions that you will have on the quantitative, they are fair. You first should ask her, why that data? Why is she proposing that? Because it may address all of your questions. So when there's time to talk with her, why is she saying those things? Because it may address concerns that you have. It may not. I don't know the answer to that, but it very well could. So still, you're looking at now for May 1st, like a mid-February. Because because this is a little, I mean, it says, it does say at least 14 days before, but it's probably not gonna be 14 days before, because that doesn't give the board time. The board has to do its work. And then the person who's, so you're talking about 6 weeks. If she get 2 weeks, you get 2 weeks, and they get 2 weeks, that's 6 weeks, right? And then you gotta have the meeting. So you're probably talking about 2 months. You with me?
So you're talking about February? Yeah. Yes, I am with you, because that was one of the concerns that I had in terms of the data sets that we use when we're having this discussion. Because we will not have state data, all we will have is our data that we're doing internally, really.
Yeah.
And it's iReady, I think, is what we use, and something else in high school. And so, also the cutoff date, to do exactly what you said, where we cut the data off to make the assessment and evaluation. So really, this is August to probably February.
Probably, right. Well, I mean, like, the superintendent's voice is pretty important here, right? Because she may say, to make the May 1st, we can start February 15th. Like, she may have a different thought about that. But I'm just wanting to point out, it's not like May 1st and you say she submits it on April 15th, because that doesn't give you time. That doesn't give you time. But you shouldn't have to be stressed about this as much, because number one, this year's main baseline data in the first place. And honestly, whatever happens May 1st, when you get that state data, that's gonna inform where I would say this can inform where you really are, but the state data is gonna also give you a lot more data. And I don't even know where are they now? They finally got it together before I left, but we finally started getting it at least by June, I think.
No.
But it was way late.
It's
later.
It's gotten late.
Got back late. So it used to be, before we didn't get it to the fall. Then they pushed and they started getting it in June, but so part of it is, if you don't get it to the fall, can you really do, now you actually could as lagging data. So you could do next year's May 1st, because it's still about the lagging data, right? But it's still gonna be hard because you don't have the comparative data. So you have to think about that. But I'm just saying right now, following what's in your contract, you're probably looking at February, and so that's a conversation to have.
So Tamika, I would posit that baseline data is the end of the year, of the last school year, and that we're trying to see, based on what the end of the last school year, what has this particular administration done to shift some of those things in a positive direction. So I would posit that August, 23-24 school year provides us with baseline data that we want to move away from or move in the right direction from. So that's just one thing I wanted to clarify in terms of my life.
And so for this year, it still has to be the same though. So it can't, you can do whatever you want to do, but for an apples to apples, so if this year you're using iReady, then it would be the August to November iReady data last year versus this year.
That's what we got. So I look back at the board meetings and the reports. There's an end of year report that gives TCAP, but there's also a May report that based it on iReady and those sort of things.
Yeah.
So we could literally move, how did we move from those things? But the problem again becomes, we got the data. I'm not even sure what data that is. I have to look at it. But as long as we're at apples and apples for this particular year,
exactly right.
that is a place we can start as baseline.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, it's okay. Like, you should be okay with that. That you're having. This is not going to be state data, but you say, what is the most reliable data? And also, keep in mind, so, even if it's not perfect, it still should go this way, right? So I'm just saying, even if you're using a bad data set, a bad test, it still should be better on the bad test, right? So if I'm using a treadmill at my house that's not calibrated, the fact that it's not calibrated makes me look better than I actually am. That's not the problem. That means when I take a test in August, even in that wrongly calibrated treadmill, if I take the test again in February, I should improve, is what I'm saying, so.
I like the weight.
I still have my scale, that's 5 pounds lighter.
Yeah, but the scale, so it don't matter if the scale is off, it should still be going down, right? So that's what I'm saying. So we should think through that.
I hear us talking about measurable data, and we talked about iReady, right? And but we have the 9-week assessment. We can still consider using that. That'll be a little more accurate since we won't have those test scores back.
So this is where I would say I would rely on the superintendent, she and her team are the expert there, to say the quantitative that you presented, what's the best we can use for this year. Now, next year is going to be different. You're going to set up, together you're going to set up a different kind of process, but for this year. So instead of telling her, you should say, hey, Dr. Fagan, because she's going to want to get time with her team, probably teachers, and figure out this. So right now, if you say that's the quantitative measure, here's the timeline, she can come back to you and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. She doesn't have to say that by today or by Friday. She can come back and say.
I think it's fair, and maybe take the principals and the teachers' thoughts into consideration.
I think you should just ask her, and then you get out of it. You tell her, come back to us with what's the best data. Now you may say, who did you? And if she say, I talked to 2 people, you might say, oh, we don't think that's enough. But you let her, you ask her, what is the best data set that gets us these quantitative measures so that we can have, some data for this year. Let her come back to you on that. Now you can ask her about it, but instead of even saying, do this, because the thing about that, the more you direct, who then is accountable, right? And that's what I used to have to say when I was CEO, like the more the board tells the leader what to do, who actually is accountable for the decision. So that's why you should, so yes, and I mean, she probably will include all of those, but I don't know.
Karen here.
I think zooming out a little, I think the question that I kept asking when I looked at these and it didn't feel like it was measuring the thing, that it wasn't hitting the mark in my brain, is what are the greatest challenges facing the district, and how can we use this to set expectations to make progress? It is up to the superintendent to say, here's where I think the proxy data lives, that we can measure apples to apples, and this is the analysis that I've done to give 1% or 3%, whatever it is that she brings to us. That is for her to decide and bring that forward. I think attendance and literacy, for me, has to be part of these metrics.
I would agree with that as part of the metrics. I'm concerned about the baseline and how she determines the baseline, because this has been a district that's been in upheaval, quite honestly, the last few years. And so, what is the baseline underneath her leadership? Because it has been, we've gone through interim superintendents and all of that. So how do we determine, that she a part of that conversation to determine what she feels would be a good baseline, and having her a part of this so that she can truly feel like, okay, this is something I can take ownership of. Is that something that we should be having a conversation about?
Yes. So for this year, trusting that what she said was the quantitative measure, that's what she thinks is fair for this year, right? Like you have to assume the 1% decrease in this. Doesn't mean you don't have questions. Like someone said, I don't know what the quality rate is. She may have a very good explanation of why. For now, that's not. Moving forward, you're exactly right. I will say, for a new superintendent, you probably don't have real baseline data to year 3. I just want to be honest. I just want to be for real. Like you got to, it is not these like easy input, like there's a lot of stuff. Like one thing I can tell you is that it is not, there are going to be some mistakes, because we don't know yet. So you're probably not going to be really looking at a real baseline until the 3rd year. So she gets through this year, there'll be a data. You look at the next year. Now you're looking at, because it really is trend, right? The same way that we do our data is on 3-year trend, right? How our kids perform is over a 3-year trend. If how they perform is over a 3-year trend, it's kind of difficult to say that how the district is doing is, so I'm just saying, I think you got time for that, and I will, I won't recommend it. There's a lot of people who can help at a much higher level than even me to help you all think through that's fair. So that's a fair question.
So as I think about trend data and I think about movement, just like there's an expectation of movement with our students and movement with our teachers, we want to see movement from one place to the other. So I think when you say baseline, I don't want anyone to leave from here thinking that, oh, we're just gonna wait until 2 or 3 year cycles and then we'll decide how far we need to go. I think we have to set something. We have to set the North Star, and then are we making incremental changes in the positive way towards that North Star? And then what is it that we're expecting? How are we expecting you to make those changes? So I think I want to make sure everybody's clear on that.
Well, and to be fair, that's what she submitted. She was like 2% is growth, right? She said we're gonna go from here to there based on whatever data that was. But it's still, what I'm saying is, I don't think that the superintendent would disagree with that. It's just the issue of what does that mean, and how aggressive are you? So part of what I meant by baseline is how aggressive are you in year 1? How aggressive are you in year 2? How aggressive are you in year 3? Clearly, you're far more aggressive in year 3 than you would be in year 1, based on what you can expect the system to know and move and understand about. And especially since this year, so next year, if the board ends up doing it, next year will probably be the first time that you actually have a strategic plan with strategic goals and a strategic, like, this is what we're working toward. Now, I'm not saying as a system, each superintendent is looking at that, but you may have, your evaluation is going to be different. It's going to be guided by those things based on what you want to do. So just keep in mind, we're talking about a snapshot of time of this year. We got the out years.
Yes, actually what I was about to say is already, you just kind of cleared it up and nailed it as well, because I think overall, your expectation was high in the district, but the implementation has been so low, from past superintendents, that going from 0 to 1% statewide looks like a win. Because it has been past data saying, oh, the district has gone from 0 to 3% for its TCAP scores, and outward it looks bad. You say, oh, you should go from 0 to 3, but you're still under 5%. But district-wide, it looks like we have made great gains. So I guess, not too much get into her thinking about it, she probably took that into, the superintendent probably took that into consideration as well. So, hey, you get a 1% gain here and a 2% decrease in this particular field. That looks like success for the district.
I guess again, that's a fair conversation. Like, where did these come from, right? It's not like you don't have some trend data. Has the district over the last 5 years been growing at 2% or 3% or 5%? So if it's over the last several years, it's been growing at 5%, is 2% enough? If it's been growing at 0.5%, 2% is aggressive. That's what I'm saying. So that's where you say, where did these come from, right? So that you're working in partnership. So the decisions about that, though, still, the date, it says May 1st. Oh, it says by May 1st, right? I'm guessing you're not going to try to do it earlier than May 1st. Then it's, when does the superintendent submit the self-evaluation documentation? When would the board submit? And are you going to hire a third party? I don't think you have to have those decisions made today, because I think it's a lot that you still need time. I think you made the big decisions around, are you going to do, and the reason why the formal evaluation is because the time is coming for that. I guess you do need to decide, are you sticking with the May 1st date? And you're not trying to do before May 1st, is my side. Anybody thinking it's before May 1st? Because the contract just says by May 1st. So, you sticking with May 1st? Okay, so the board chair said May 1st. Everybody agree with that? So then it becomes, and I think that this is, y'all can work this out with the superintendent on this date, like what is fair, because it could be February, it could be March, or I don't know when y'all will need to do these things. And in the past, you've hired a third-party consultant, I would highly recommend, that you do, because then it takes it from you, and they are professionals who know how to do that. All right, that was it.
I have a question. Superintendent came in. With everything going on in our community, our culture and climate, would it be a good idea to?
I'm sorry, I'm sitting here holding the mic when you're talking.
So many questions in our community, would it be a good idea to do a culture and climate survey as part of the evaluation?
Okay, I can put it out there. Now, I'm gonna push you. Was that a statement or a question?
It's a question.
Okay, it's a legit question.
Even though I missed the second meeting when we talked about the weights, I was always concerned about how do we get from the 15% over to 20%. So just how we gather that particular data. I think it'd be a fair survey.
Yeah.
And I think also Superintendent said if within her recommendation, she would have included that into the evaluation anyway.
Okay.
I would love to see a culture and climate survey, but I think putting it as, I think it carrying any special weight, I think the fair thing would be to do
Nobody
is
said
like,
that.
no, I mean, I would, in the same, it'd be like the goal would just be establishing a baseline for that. Because I think that's something that needs to be done, but not make meaning of it in this year in terms of where it's at, but just creating it.
So one thing I want to push up, just answer the question, because this is where then y'all get stuck, because then everybody starts talking about, well, I don't think that, and it sounds like assigning some meaning that somebody didn't say, so don't do that, just say, do you agree? Because if everybody agreed, then you got to get to that conversation.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair, because otherwise you don't want to, because now the next conversation will be, well, I think it should be weighed in, that's not the conversation.
No, I agree.
Yeah, just like, okay, I'm gonna say.
I agree. Like I mentioned earlier, people want to be heard, you know, I think it's important. And then you just get a true, kind of gauge of where we are. You know, being business owners, we do it all the time, just doing culture and climate. I think it's fair. I think it's good.
I agree.
Yes.
All right, so I would say, Madam Chair, you and Dr. Payton, y'all talk through that and figure out the process of that. So, hi, Dr. Payton. So, decision was made, the agreement was to keep the current weights as your recommendation. So, 30, 20, 20, 15, 15. Informal evaluation, right, will consist of board members will set up to an hour meeting, one-on-one, informal conversation with the superintendent, nothing more, nothing less, between now and November 30, as provided in the contract. And then what else?
And the evaluation will be aligned with the.
Yes, so you do, so I don't know if you're gonna, it's 455, and part of it was on the weights, and so we didn't discuss or make a decision on the weights. They kind of had brief discussion, so now you have to decide, do you all want to discuss the weights, or
You mean the quantitative?
The quantitative, I'm sorry, quantitative measures, not weights, I'm sorry. I mean, it's fine, you're not gonna get through those. Part of it was, the discussion would just be around superintendent's deeper thought process on it, where they come from, how would you measure, knowing that we don't have to say data, what's the fair measures. I understand keeping the date May 1st as provided in the contract, but understanding what that means. So you're not gonna have state data, but you allow the superintendent to say, here are data sets that's fair. We'll use, I've been saying read 180 because I don't want the irate people come for me, so I don't know. So since y'all don't do read 180 anymore, I'm keeping read 180. We're gonna use read 180 from August to this as a measure of 2% growth, right? I'm just talking, right? So I think you should feel safe enough to say you've made the decisions you need to make by October. So the instrument as is, You're gonna do informal one-on-one with the superintendent between now and November 30th.
No, we haven't done the quantitative.
But you, yeah, so the question becomes, when, I mean, I don't know, so you gotta get some time on the quantitative though, but you need to get agreement on those. And so,
We need to sit down with the superintendent and go over that part, right? Correct?
yes,
Okay, so we need to figure out a time where she can actually be at the meeting so we can ask those questions, so we can get through it.
yeah, cause this thing was to 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, so,
So my question is, today is Monday,
well, it's not up to me, it's up to you, so are y'all staying down to do it?
I can't say now.
Now, because majority of the other, two of our commissioners now.
It says 6 o'clock on the calendar.
I was told to 5.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
Two of our
And so-
commissioners now, so they need to be here.
So we need a commitment, I know the board is committed, so we need a commitment from Dr. Fagans as to a time and a date
Yeah.
prior to Friday, because Friday we're committed to having this done in accordance with our policy. So if you could look at your schedule and let's try to coordinate a time that we can all come together and be committed to discussing the quantitative measures. And if you need to, is this something, Chair Coleman, that you'd like to work out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you're, at the end of September, you, if you recall, you said, you know, your last meeting would have to be
The 25th.
on or before October 25th.
Yep.
So, and so you still have time. And the good part is really just, you have those quantitative measures, superintendent gets to, you know, why those measures and what does she expects to be the evidence for those measures, right? Being, of course, like you all understanding, you're limited this year, because number one of the timing and of just of what might be available, right? And understanding that you're just trying to get a baseline, a measure for those. So, I don't know when you'll do that. I am on a plane tomorrow. I'm gonna get back to Thursday, but you don't need me, you're good. All you gotta do is talk about the quantitative measures at this point. And that's like, you have this, so you can do this. I mean, I can do Friday, I'm back Thursday, but I'm saying you don't have to wait till Friday, because it really is just, here are the measures, superintendent telling you why, y'all ask questions, y'all decide, move forward or not on those quantitative.
I mean, I think for consistency and guidance, because I'll say and be vulnerable, I'm a new board member. And I want to make sure that we do this in a correct way and we understand what that discussion should look like and what we can all get on the same page about the right quantitative measures, because this is again to ensure that we're able to see some progression and that we're clear on what that's going to look like. So I would appreciate if we could still have you complete this process on Friday with us.
Also, they don't have to be
What
Friday.
time you back Thursday? Friday, not Thursday. Like, what time you back Thursday?
I'm back, my flight gets in at 11 o'clock p.m.
I might be like,
from
well,
DC,
11:30.
so I will not be leaving out Thursday night.
So maybe it's best if we do it.
Well, we can a Friday morning.
I was going to
What
recommend
time
that
are
we
you having
take.
in Friday evening? I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm out of town Wednesday through Friday, so I will not be there whenever you all meet. I was going to recommend, since we have a business meeting tomorrow, that there could be an initial presentation and discussion, come with any questions, maybe we put a 30-minute time limit on it, and then facilitate any additional conversation. That way, if on a Friday conversation, you couldn't add thoughts, I've already shared thoughts in a one-on-one with Dr. Fagans too, that there's still an opportunity for the public to see it right now and have that, we may be closer than we think, on some of the quantitative measures. So maybe an initial conversation tomorrow.
So that was initial conversation in your meeting business.
We may be too late on the agenda though, so,
No,
sorry.
you can always add to the agenda.
And just put a time.
Yeah, we can add to
Can we do that, Madam Chair?
We have a special call tomorrow.
We do?
No, executive session, I'm sorry, executive session.
No, I think they were saying add it to the business.
Add to the business, to the executive session. Oh, can we add that? Well, you can just, if she can let us know, right? Let her know. Okay, perfect.
So at some point, you're gonna try to add it, and you might have to, they're forgiveness, but you can add it and talk about it tomorrow. And then you're still gonna try to find time Friday to come together? Is that what you're saying? Because you still need to formally say yes to these things.
Superintendent, are you available Friday?
Not until after 5.
That definitely ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. I can do things.
And then y'all are out of town, is that?
No, we don't need to. But we have to have this in Friday, and 5 o'clock is not gonna work, so we need to find.
Only reason why Friday is because you have to, by October is Halloween, but y'all are gonna be gone, that's why y'all say 25th.
We'll be back.
No, the 30th.
You just need to have it done, I mean, just following the letter of what it says, you just need to have it done by, 12/01 November 1st, so. So basically, you'll work it out. You
Right,
gotta
we only
figure out
have
the
one day,
time.
which is the 31st, after we get back, so. I mean, that's all we got to work with is Friday, and she's busy until 5, so that's not gonna work. And then we have 31st, that's the deadline, we have to really turn it in. So we have to make a decision here whether we're gonna be here in between now and Friday.
We gotta have superintendent involved.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So we gotta, so we have this Tuesday to Thursday window.
Well, will you be available on the 31st, anytime that afternoon?
We can do 12:30 to 1:30. 8 a.m.
I didn't hear you.
8 a.m. 12:30 to 1:30.
I'll wait till, is it 8 to 9?
Can you give us a little longer, can you give us a little longer than an hour? If we do 12:30.
May I make a suggestion for our consideration? That we add it to the agenda, the discussion of it, because I want to give everybody an opportunity, enough time to have, if we have any questions, so that when we come back on the 31st, we're simply just approving it.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, if we can add it to.
We can do that.
Okay, then that's
For
my
tomorrow,
suggestion for our consideration.
And then on the 31st, superintendent, you can give us a little longer than an hour?
Well,
31st is that's approved.
yeah, I mean, so if you handle it tomorrow, then you just.
Because we
need
just
to
doing
meet.
the discussion tomorrow.
You just need
We're
a,
doing the discussion part, portion.
Well, I don't know, I mean, you may discuss and agree, and then tomorrow you're good, and then the next thing all you gotta do is vote. If you discuss tomorrow and you're far apart from each other, then you're gonna have to come back together to get to agreement, so.
The 31st.
Well, but, right, so that depends, so, no, so if tomorrow you agree and it's all done, then you just need the 31st for a special.
Right. I got you.
There you go. Well, so I'm talking to everybody, so you just need a special call meeting to approve it. But if you don't have agreement tomorrow, you still need a meeting, you need time, and you probably gonna need more than an hour to get to the decision. And so, while the 31st, I commend you, but if you miss the 31st, now, no one's gonna come and get you, but you got,
We got deadline.
Yeah, you don't play around with contract.
Yeah.
And so, contract is a contract, so don't play around with it. If you start playing around with it now, that means
No,
none of it.
we gonna pay around with it. We gonna pay around with it. That's it, that's all.
So where you going for? The 31st.
So,
I'll tell you what, how about y'all work it out?
Superintendent will not be available till after 5 o'clock because of her obligations with our principals for this week. So, we're talking about when we gonna meet again. That's why the question was the 31st. Superintendent cannot meet this week because of her obligation with our principals, was what I was saying.
That's what we was asking, can we add it to discussion tomorrow?
Yeah, but we have to still vote. We have to call a special call to vote.
Yeah, that's gonna be the
Yeah.
31st.
That'd be
What I was
31st.
saying, the
Okay.
31st.
So the 31st, an hour with or without the superintendent could be perfect. If tomorrow you get to agreement. If you don't get to agreement tomorrow, you might need more time than an hour is what I'm saying. So you won't know until tomorrow. So you can hold off on what's next because you may have to do something the 25th and the 31st is what I'm trying to say because you won't know until tomorrow. Like y'all could be really close and it's a done deal and now you just need a meeting to close the loop on all of it and have your process in place. That's what I. So tomorrow we'll keep. I mean, you'll be able to see where you are and what you can. No, I can't close your meeting.
We want to thank you for your time and efforts. It's been a long day. This meeting was adjourned. Have a good evening.